Hi, everyone. If you are tuning in, I'm just waiting a couple of minutes here to allow viewers a chance to log on, since this is the first live stream that I have hosted on the TSB Television YouTube channel. And as you can see from the title, we'll be talking hopefully about the Milwaukee Bucks boycotting Game 5 of their first round playoff series tonight, and the subsequent decision by the NBA to postpone all three scheduled games. And that decision not only could impact the NBA, but as we are watching unfold at this very moment, several teams in Major League Baseball, the Brewers, are in discussion about what to do with tonight's game. So we're just waiting a couple of minutes, hopefully to get a chance for viewers to come on. But if you would like to offer your thoughts, your comments on what this means for race relations and what this means for sports moving forward, please drop a comment. So again, we are just waiting for a few more viewers to log in so they have a chance to contribute if they so choose. And I also should add that if you don't want to drop a comment but would like to appear on an episode of Mic'd Up Sports to discuss this, we have our first viewer. Well, hey there, Devna. This is the first time that I've had a chance to interact with some of these subscribers. We recently passed 10,000, so it's a bit surreal to interact with all these people who have grown up watching my high school games and other broadcasts, whether it's the Mic'd Up Sports podcast, highlight reels, or we've done semi-pro games. So, well, it's a pleasure to meet one of you in person, electronically, that is. So I'm just getting the links out. I'm trying to get a little more, trying to get some more viewers in here before we start. And again, this is all about a rapid reaction. Guess we have our first one. The NBA might be in trouble, says Don Ackerman. And that's something I've wrestled with. To say that this is a year where everything unexpected has happened would be an understatement. 2020 has been that kind of year where everything we thought would happen has gone in the opposite direction. Logistically, it's not too difficult for the NBA to decide, let's push back games. I've heard that too, that ratings numbers are down. It's hard to say why that is, depending on who you talk to, depending on the outlets you look up, and I'm not implying any specific person here. They're all going to have specific viewpoints that reinforce their idea or their narrative as to why numbers are down. Again, could be all sorts of things. Maybe there is a backlash to what the NBA is doing. Then again, it's not common. In fact, it's never happened before where you have NBA games in August. Usually we would be talking about free agency or the lead up. Right now, the NFL would be the creme de la creme and the playoff push in Major League Baseball. So we have to remember, in regards to the NBA and NHL, they're playing games in what normally is their off season. But the speed at which this unfolded, with the Bucks deciding we're not playing tonight, and then the NBA going along with it, not something you would have thought of even a month ago. Now, if you're not sure why the Bucks chose to boycott tonight's game and why the NBA decided to postpone it, it's in response to what happened in Kenosha. And I imagine for a lot of viewers, whether you're watching this live or if you watch this on demand, it would bring back memories of what happened Memorial Day weekend with George Floyd here in Minneapolis. In fact, the two incidents occurred almost 3 months apart exactly. And the conversations with George Floyd, they lasted for about a month. It was the dominant headline until about maybe early July, mid-July, based on my observations. And then it simmered. It looked like we had moved on to the next cycle. Now we get the incident that happened with Jacob Blake and some pretty nasty developments in Kenosha and the surrounding areas in Wisconsin. And I'm sure a lot of you, myself included, were thinking to ourselves, here we go again. But I'm sensing a bigger step this time, or a bigger risk that the NBA, that the Bucks decided to take. Milwaukee had a strong season a year ago, and it looked like they were primed to be a contender in the East again. They lead the Orlando Magic 3-1. They could have had every reason to play and then focus on what to do afterward, given their position in this series. At the same time, the players, even though they are in a bubble, they don't live in one, if you know what I mean. And it brought back some memories, and I've been observing this, at least through social media. It's difficult to flesh out what's right and what's wrong in that circumstance. But as Adrian Wojnarowski, he, of course, known for the Woj bombs, he noted the Bucks players made the decision, deciding they wouldn't leave the locker room. And Zora Stevenson offered her remarks. She is one of the reporters on the Milwaukee Bucks TV broadcast team, and noted the significance of the Bucks willing to risk a game where they were one game away from advancing to the next round. Again, one of the favorites in the East. You've got the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo, leading the way. And they decided that what is happening in Wisconsin, what has happened in the last 3 months, was more important than a playoff game. Admittedly, I wasn't sure we would ever get to that point. Race relations have been a hot topic over the last several years, going back to Colin Kaepernick. However you feel about him taking a knee or what the players are doing to protest, I'm not here to debate that or say that I'm right or you're wrong. But this isn't a sudden transformation. What the Bucks have done and what the NBA chose to do in not having playoff games tonight, to me, is another development, another extension to a movement, to a narrative, to a discussion that had been brewing for the last several years as athletes, sports organizations, corporations, you name it, everyone trying to grapple with how to handle this as best they can. And the right answer is there really is one. Well, we have one interested party. Well, Don, I appreciate you contributing to this conversation. Do they stop televising NBA games? Hard to say. As I was noting, I think before some of you had logged on, logistically speaking, because the NBA and NHL and WNBA are all operating in bubbles, if they were to decide we're not playing tonight, it doesn't require as many resources to reschedule a game because fans can't attend games in the bubble anyway. So it's pretty easy for the EA to move dates around. And however you feel about it, I don't think, presuming that every other league said we're not going to do the next game or the next race, we're going to sit this one out. Economically speaking, these sports leagues, they draw good ratings, and I don't see networks, however they feel about it, pulling the plug on broadcast because that takes away some of the revenue. In fact, the leagues restarting their seasons, whether it was bubbles with the NBA, NHL, WNBA, or the maybe ill-advised restart plan that Major League Baseball put in place, and that's the best way of putting it, ill-advised, because, well, we all know what happened there. Leagues and TV partners, they have obligations to fulfill with their contracts, and if you don't have games, then it becomes more difficult to fulfill them. And sports networks, they live on live sports, so I don't know if they would go that far as to stopping the broadcast of NBA games over this, because what would you replace it with? And the NBA, the Big Four men's leagues, as we often like to call it, they draw a sizable audience. And I'm not sure counter-programming would play out. And we've seen the struggles with startup leagues, for example. How many fans will embrace or walk away? I think that's something that may be hard to quantify, because I go back to NASCAR when they decided to embrace the movement more so than they had last year. Whether it was getting behind Bubba Wallace after the incident at Talladega, which fortunately turned out to be far more, what's the word, benign than initially thought. That didn't stop drivers in the league from getting behind them, banning the Confederate flag at races. Yes, it angered some fans, but I do recall folks like Renee Montgomery and Alvin Kamara from the NFL attending a race in subsequent weeks. I don't know if Renee attended a race, but she started following the sport. I think it's one of those impacts you may not see fully develop until you get more data and have a chance to measure metrics, because, well, we don't even know when fans will be able to return. Whenever this season's over, it's going to be a mess for future seasons. At least this next season, as far as how to schedule games and the status of the pandemic, because the popular theory is that until there's a vaccine or some level of herd immunity, and we don't know what that will look like, we may be stuck in this period of limbo for some time. So to really understand how many would embrace it or walk away, we may not get a full picture until it's safe to attend sporting events again under normal circumstances. For example, the Minnesota Vikings, if the NFL does have a season, they said the first 2 home games will be played without fans. The St. Paul Saints, minor league team, they have a limit of 1,500, and they reconfigured their stadium to ensure that fans are socially distant, and several NASCAR races have had to be run without fans. So how do we measure it? I don't know. There's just so many variables here. So we'll have to see what happens. I know people look to sports as an escape from the day-to-day, and that was one reason, I got into it all those years ago. But over time, some of you know I covered the WNBA for 10 years, and I covered the Minnesota Swarm for a few seasons. I've done high school, I've done college basketball. And as we can watch with social media and even just interactions with athletes, coaches, parents, what have you, I've met them all through sports, but there's a world out there. So I guess the answer to your question, it's a long-winded one. We just have to wait and see what the data looks like. And as we continue this situation, well, someone responded on Facebook, and I am actually trying to share this live stream. So if you just give me a moment here as we continue. Some fans can't escape with sports, so I wonder if they will find another escape. I wonder that too. And at the same time, I also know it's not just athletes who are speaking up about this. Throughout entertainment, and that's not to say everyone is taking one side or the other, you are seeing less reluctance to speak up or less fear about what it might do to the brand. And there is a line from an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that I go to whenever something like this comes up. Whenever we see something unprecedented and we talk about the risks involved, like the boycotts tonight, what that could mean for the NBA. I presume the games will be rescheduled and they will find a way to continue the playoff series in some way, shape, or form. But I forget the actor's name, but he played Mark Twain. It was from the episode Time's Arrow, where Mark Twain inadvertently ends up on the Enterprise, and in the climax, so he proposes sending himself back in time to correct things so that they can get Jean-Luc Picard back on the Enterprise. And the rest of the crew said, I hope you know the risks involved with this. And his reply was, there's a risk in everything. And sometimes the only way to find out what happens is to take that leap. NASCAR did that, and they're still holding races. I don't know, how the ratings compare to last year. I know people are starved for some sense of normalcy in this pandemic. So what that does for ratings may play into it as well. I did get a response from Facebook, and I'm actually going to share this stream right now on Facebook so that others have a chance to offer their insight. And once again, if you want to share your thoughts, your feelings, this is completely off the cuff, no script. Just drop a comment on YouTube, and we are looking to tape some more episodes of the Mic'd Up Sports podcasts. We did a summer series on George Floyd and used it as a platform for folks to get their feelings out of their system, because we know it can be stressful. And trust me, I have my own set of feelings, not just on George Floyd, but with so many other things that can weigh on you. But as you all know, I am a storyteller. I enjoy creating things, and I like creating opportunities for people to share their voice, however they may feel about it. For disclosure, Don has been one of my supporters on Patreon, and we have a great rapport, and I think he and I are scheduled to call some Stillwater soccer if the seasons go according to plan for Valley Access channels. And if it's a sport, Don's there, and if it's a sport, I'm there. So let me share these links here on social media so that others have an opportunity to get involved in the conversation. You know what? There's something to be said about unfiltered programming, unfiltered video. All right, let's get this out, because I want people to take part in this if they can. So speaking of responses, here is something one of my buddies had said when he dropped a comment on Facebook. What as a society can we do when these things happen? A lot of times nothing happens, and then these tragedies keep happening. We get angry, and this happens a lot with current events, not just what happened to Jacob Blake in Kenosha or George Floyd in Minneapolis. I have to agree with my buddy Ted. You go through this cycle again and again, and it just feels like an endless time loop. So Ted said this. He applauds the NBA and its players for doing something. They've been at the forefront at using their platform to create change. I know some people don't like politics or social issues in sports, but it forces people to talk about it and try to create change in their own lives, and I have to agree with them. Whether or not you agree with it, it gets you thinking about something outside of sports, and it's something in a broader sense. Why I keep covering sports is not because they advocate for positions I agree with per se, but I think as Jerry Seinfeld put it, we're rooting for clothes. Yes, there's the sense of team bonding, team building, community with the sports league. So it's not like the players don't care about the jerseys they wear, but it's a business. I know Minnesota Lynx fans were upset when Simone Augustus decided to sign with the Los Angeles Sparks as a free agent. In fact, the Sparks and Lynx are scheduled to have a game tonight. No word yet on what the WNBA decides to do. But one update from Michelle Vopel. And again, this is live as of August 26th. So some of these anecdotes may be dated in the next week or so, but I wanted to get these feelings out there. Pre-game Zooms with Mike Tebow and Nikki Collin and Derek Fisher have been delayed. That was one of the updates from Michelle Vopel, and that happened about 20 minutes ago. Still a fluid situation. Mystics and Dream are scheduled to have a broadcast on ESPN2 shortly, and the Sparks and Lynx, their game is supposed to be simulcast on the CBS Sports Network. But to reiterate my earlier point, Minnesota Lynx fans were upset when Simone Augustus decided to sign with the Los Angeles Sparks after spending her entire career in a Minnesota uniform, but she felt that team, that setting would be best for her as she wraps up her career. Now, there are players who do offer a sense of loyalty to their teams. Kobe Bryant comes to mind, Derek Jeter, who spent their entire career in one jersey. Well, Kobe Bryant, it was two jerseys, if you count the numbers as separate, but he wore the same colors, and both numbers were retired. So one and the same. But it's no different than most of us. How many changes have we made? How many job titles have we held throughout the years? So it goes back to what Ted was saying, doing something. Yes, we enjoy watching games. We enjoy witnessing peak athleticism at its finest, no matter what league you follow, no matter what sport. But in conversations I have had with athletes past and present, I had a couple on my podcast in the summer, Arminty Harrington and Delisha Milton-Jones, following the George Floyd incident. Both offered candid commentary, and it's worth checking out if you haven't seen those episodes. But yeah, we might joke around about what they did as players, what Arminty and Delisha are doing as coaches now. But there's a world out there, and something that I remember long ago when I took a St. Paul Connections course, the instructor said this, and it's something that I've taken to heart ever since. Most athletes, most people in sports aren't interested in reciting facts and figures and box scores without context. You know, they're people too, and if you really want to make an impression, just approach them that way. So how does that relate to the point Ted was making? We celebrate champions. I should know it was cool to see Minnesota win those 4 titles and the dynasty of the 2010s put together a product that the Minnesota sports scene hadn't witnessed in a long time, not since the 91 Twins anyway. But at some point, most of us will forget about the records, the points, all the other accolades. But it's the relationships and the sense of humanity that sticks with you. So that is my long-winded take on it, as we get a few live streamers coming in. Now, we are looking to set up some proper discussions or more traditional Q&A panels on Mic'd Up Sports. So this is just a way to get some feelings out there right now. But if you want to take part, or if you know someone else who does, whether you're watching this live or you watch this on playback, just contact us at tsbtelevision@gmail.com or contact me on social media through Facebook or Twitter and Instagram at the Mike Peden. That is the best way to find me. And to reiterate why we are doing this, the Milwaukee Bucks earlier this afternoon chose to boycott their first round playoff game with the Orlando Magic, even though they were up 3-1. The other 4 teams scheduled to have playoff games tonight, the Rockets and Thunder said they were going to boycott their game, and LeBron James, using a word that is not safe for work, made his thoughts clear about what was happening in Kenosha. And the NBA, in response, decided to postpone the games. And they could have gone any direction. As a fellow reporter pointed out, Bobby Marks, he's a front office insider with ESPN, he noted, and this is something that I find striking that the NBA may not have done just a few years ago. There is a failure to appear language in the operations manual that includes forfeiting the game and a $5 million fine. And before the NBA announced their postponement of tonight's playoff games, he said the failure to appear language, just because it's in there, doesn't mean it would be applied in this situation because, as he noted, an understatement of the year, like everything this year, we are dealing with situations that have never happened before. Whether it's the pandemic or the response to civil unrest with George Floyd and Jacob Blake, and sadly, I have a feeling we may find ourselves in this conversation again in the future. You can't predict when and where, so I'm not going to, but it's like so many other things. It takes a long time for a cycle to be broken, whether it's in sports or with current events. I remember a saying about memorization that it takes on average 7 repetitions. That's what I feel like we're in right now. And it just takes a lot of run-throughs and a lot of same old to get people to understand why some are upset, why some are stressed out or tired. So if you're watching this, thank you for joining us in this live stream. Feel free to drop a comment on your response. We've had a couple of folks give us a line. And again, we will have more traditional episodes of Mic'd Up Sports in the days to come as we process an unprecedented event in sports. I wasn't sure I would see this day. We've had boycotts before, but that was on a more global scale, going back to the Olympic boycotts, the most notable 1980, 1984. Of course, you all know about or I shouldn't say you all know, but a lot of you remember 1980 or hear about it in research, and how the United States, several countries participated in a boycott of the Summer Games because it owes to Cold War tensions. And then in 1984, you saw a similar response to the Eastern Bloc, if my memory is correct, when Los Angeles hosted the games. So boycotts in sports have happened. And we've also seen sports postponed or impacted by national events before. But when you look at precedent, 9/11, sports were on hold for a week or so, and then they went back to normal. It was a momentary pause. Here we've got a 2-pronged or double-edged sword. You had the pandemic, which forced us into this weird schedule in the first place, which is why I'm holding off on judgment or analysis on why ratings for sports leagues maybe aren't what they're used to be. Again, we're not used to having NBA and NHL games in August. It's usually MLB, WNBA, and we'd be talking about the ramp up to the NFL season. In fact, preseason will be going on right now. So the pandemic forced us into this weird schedule. And I think it also played into why you're seeing such a forceful response from the NBA and even NASCAR to an extent, because the pandemic put a lot of us out of work. I know I haven't had much in the last 5 months. My position with Major League Baseball was suspended due to safety concerns. The spring season for high school sports was canceled. I don't protest any of those decisions, but I was accustomed to a schedule where, I'm not home a lot in the evenings or most days of the week. I'm usually covering a Twins game or covering a high school game, working on a story. My lifeblood was sports broadcasts. Now that we don't have that, it gives us a lot of time to examine things. And while some jobs and sports have restarted, and as we've seen in terms of health, the NBA, WNBA have gone off without too many complications, we still have constant reminders about how abnormal this restart is. They're playing in one site without fans physically present. And we have another comment, and I'd like to share that. Danny from LA. It's YouTube. I'm so pissed. Boycotting doesn't make changes. Education and voting does. That's an interesting take. And I would say the boycotts themselves, I don't know what impact this will have. And again, the games are being postponed. So as I understand it, following the live feed as we speak, Washbaum himself had said the Milwaukee Bucks were on a conference call with Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul and Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. So perhaps Milwaukee is taking this boycott and using it as an opportunity to, at the very least, educate the people in power in the state of Wisconsin about their thoughts, their feelings, and why they decided we're not going to have a game tonight. The boycotts, well, it gives us a few less viewing options for tonight. I would like to think it could create a platform, though, because what is this boycott doing? It's getting us to talk about it, because instead of watching Giannis Antetokounmpo do his thing, and boy, has he done a lot of that over the last couple of seasons, now we're going on about how serious this is. And I think with the Bucks boycotting and the NBA deciding to postpone it, however they feel about it, they're acknowledging the gravity of this situation that we haven't seen before. Now, to be clear, we've seen protests and statements in the past in moments of civil unrest. I covered one such instance 4 years ago when the Minnesota Lynx wore the Change Starts With Us shirts. Now, they elected not to boycott games. In fact, you saw the WNBA kind of wrestling with itself as to how to move forward. And at first they tried to limit what the players could say or wear. And then that led to media blackouts. And it was a rocky situation that smoothed itself out 4 years later, almost an about face. You've seen several WNBA players wear Breonna Taylor on their jerseys underneath their names. You see the Black Lives Matter decals on the NBA and WNBA courts. So I guess we'll have to see. What I'd like to see are what the long-term impacts of this boycott. Is this just a momentary pause and then things go back to normal? Or do the teams still playing for a championship, still in the running, do they take a larger piece of action, a larger gesture, if you will? And as I said a little while ago, what Milwaukee is doing is an extension, is an increase in action to make their voices heard, to get your attention. Whether or not it makes change, they have commanded our attention, our viewership, our eyeballs, because we're talking about a professional sports team that may not have a lot of ties to the state of Wisconsin directly, but they felt what is happening in Kenosha was bigger than one game. And now more players, and even yesterday or today, players have noted the difficulties of living in a bubble where, yes, it has helped considerably in protecting players from catching coronavirus, but for athletes that are used to traveling, going all over the country, and in some cases all over the world, but the WNBA, now you're all in one spot. You get to play, but it's a big sacrifice. So I don't know what the right answer is. And I am looking forward to the answers I will be hearing, hopefully, in the days to come as this unfolds. Because tonight, it's the NBA. Tomorrow, maybe the other sports leagues decide to take action. We shall see. So again, if you want to share your thoughts, feel free to drop a comment on this YouTube video. I may reference them in future episodes of the Mic'd Up Sports podcast. And if you would like to come on, or if you know of someone who would like to share their insight, send us an email, tsbtelevision@gmail.com, or through social media at the Mike Peden on Twitter or Instagram. And again, just to reiterate why this live stream began, the Milwaukee Bucks, and this is, at least on my Twitter feed, the biggest headline: Milwaukee Bucks chose to boycott their scheduled playoff game tonight against the Orlando Magic. The Rockets and Thunder also agreed to boycott their game, and ultimately the NBA, in a statement released earlier this afternoon, said they were going to suspend tonight's playoff games and reschedule them for a later time. A makeup date hasn't been announced yet, but it appears Milwaukee is now taking action in civics as opposed to athletics, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, the Woj Bomb. Milwaukee having discussions with the state attorney general and lieutenant governor. That's according to his sources. And it also appears there will be a meeting taking place with how to best move forward. On the WNBA front, they have games tonight. They are still on. And from Ari Chambers, you may know her. The WNBA is so important. That is her phrase. Ari, a member of Bleacher Report, worked with her on High Post Tubes during the fan-sided years. She said every 7 minutes, they will stop playing as a sign of protest. And I guess on the broadcast side of it, Kenny Smith said, seeing the players hearing the stories, I'm going to follow suit. He unplugged and walked off the set of Inside the NBA. He's been a fixture of that for many years. So we are witnessing reaction and action and gestures, decisions that I've never seen before. and the inside the NBA crew, they're not afraid to share their feelings. I remember they had a pretty extensive discussion following the 2016 election, and I've often thought they present a model on how to best balance current events with sports and knowing when to weigh in on the two. So I'm shaking my head. And now Holly Rowe confirming what R.A. Chambers shared on Twitter as well. So the WNBA will have games tonight, no postponements, but they will stop playing every 7 minutes as a sign of protest. And that in itself is unprecedented because the Bucks, for example, as I was saying, they risked a $5 million fine and forfeiting a game in their series. Now, they were up 3-1, but as you've seen, well, who can forget 2016 Cleveland Golden State? No lead is ever safe until you get that game-clinching win. For the WNBA, this is going to be unusual because you've got teams fighting for a playoff spot. It's a short season, 22 games, and as we've witnessed due to the quick turnaround between games and all the injuries that have transpired, there is no clear front runner. It is a mad dash to clinch those playoff spots with 7 or 8 games to go in the season. You know, the Lynx and Sparks are in a tight battle for that 3rd seed. The Lynx, as far as the loss column is concerned, they only sit 1 game behind Las Vegas and Seattle for the 1 seed. So there's a lot on the line. I guess we'll see what this every 7 minutes means because the quarters are 10 minutes long. So I'm guessing would they stop playing at 3 minutes? But again, for the team that's trailing, that's a pretty big statement, especially in the midst of a playoff push when everything is still on the line. So this is going to be a product and a moment we have never seen before. And I do wonder, if we didn't have the pandemic, how fans would respond to this, because presumably they would be in attendance now. There's no telling what would happen, what would have happened without it. But as I noted a few minutes ago, and this was a recurring theme when I recorded the summer podcast about George Floyd, the pandemic forces people, or has forced people, to examine facets of life that they may have been able to shrug off in past years. Because as I was saying earlier, I would have been continuing my job with Major League Baseball where I work Twins home games. I would be prepping for another season of fall sports. That guy would be excited about the state fair that would be taking place starting tomorrow if things were normal. So we would have all of these facets, all of these things, these forms of entertainment we could rely on to give ourselves something to do. And you take that away, it's exhausting. So there's a lot to unpack in the coming days here. And for someone that has been starved of content, I haven't had any games, and it may be a while before you see high school girls and boys basketball again. I hope not, because I really enjoyed the connections I got to build last winter. And what really impressed me, the amount of knowledge that Hopkins fans had, or I should say my YouTube fans had, when I would air Hopkins games. I got a chance to cover them a few times last season. And of course, Paige Beckers draws attention wherever she goes, but the amount of background info and analysis that viewers had about their other players, Taylor Woodson, Maya Najee, Maya Battle, that impressed me. So I know that people are watching these games. I have met players past and present. Coaches have told me more than once, the first thing they do is type in my name, not the school's name, but my name, to see if I've covered a team. I am working on a highlight reel with the family, and the father of the client that I'm doing this reel for told me he was watching my broadcast going back to the Taylor Hill years. And if you watch my podcast with Nia Holly, she said the same thing. I would love to be talking about all of that right now. I'd be prepping for another season of high school sports with volleyball and soccer. I know volleyball was starting to get some traction as far as viewership, and I don't have that. At least not here. I know other states may try to go as normal, but Minnesota, there won't be any fall sports, or I should say there won't be volleyball or football until the spring. And who knows what things will look like by then. So what do we have to talk about? This, because pro sports may be all we have for some time. You know, the college sports scene is going to look drastically different. Big Ten and Pac-12 have already postponed their fall sports to the spring. So there won't be football or volleyball or all the other sports that we've grown accustomed to watching. So again, a lot to unpack here. And the speed at which this is unfolding is mesmerizing. It doesn't surprise me because, again, in 2020, with social media, word travels fast. But to see the NBA, to see one team decide to boycott a game, a short time later, the NBA said we're postponing games. The WNBA, they will host games with one scheduled to take place in a few minutes, but they will stop play at the 7-minute mark of every quarter as a sign of protest. And again, that's a gamble, especially if you're a team trailing and trying to make your way into the playoffs like Atlanta is doing, and Washington. These are two teams. Washington had a great start, and they've struggled since then. They've lost 9 of the last 10. They were the defending champions. And they are still in the chase to get that 8 seed in Atlanta. They beat Minnesota not too long ago. It's not looking good for them, but these are two teams that can't afford a loss. So at the 3-minute mark of the fourth quarter, how will you respond to that? So I'll be curious to see what this looks like. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Whether it's on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment on this live stream. I'll keep this up if you are unable to watch this live but would like to do so on playback. And on social media at the Mike Peden on Twitter or Instagram. We're trying to set up some interviews and get a rapid reaction to a gesture, to a statement, a decision that we have never seen before. Even last year, I wasn't sure. What's up, Henchman Beats? I don't know who you are, but thanks for tuning in. Do I react to music? Well, I guess it depends on what kind of music. I mean, yes, who doesn't react to music? As I was saying, though, we are witnessing a series of decisions that I thought we would never see, because the boycotts have been thrown around for some time, at least among fans. And whenever issues of civil unrest, okay, I see. Well, I see what's going on here. But over the last several years, remember when sports to unite us, like after 9/11, I feel the circumstances are different. In 9/11, and I think this owes to why the pandemic is getting such a huge pendulum swing of responses here. It was clear who the antagonists were, so it was easy to direct our anger to someone. Well, Henchman Beats, thanks for dropping the recommendation. I may check that out here when I'm done with the stream. 9/11. I was a freshman in high school when that happened. And it was, I think, easier to rally around it because, congrats on 10,000 subscribers. I got to get that up at some point. I recorded a live stream on Facebook and with Latoya Turk reflecting on 10,000 viewers. And I did that more so to test how the Facebook Live worked, and it did. But and then I'll post it on YouTube. I wanted to share some clips at some point. But yeah, 10,000 subscribers. We passed that benchmark in July, and we're at 10,100 now. And what's impressed me are the number of subscribers that we're still getting, even though I haven't had new uploads for a while, because again, no sports to cover on the local level. And I made an announcement, a soft one of sorts, on my social media channels, but it may be a while before we return to sports, because soccer and swimming and tennis are the only sports active for the fall with the Minnesota State High School League as they try to navigate the pandemic and keep people safe. And likewise, I'm doing the same thing. You're having to weigh the cost-benefit analysis in a context that no one would have thought about at this time a year ago. Soccer, not my most watched sport, but I would do a couple of games because there were some matchups that my buddy Ted, the sports director of Valley Access Channels, would like me to cover. There were some big matchups taking place, and the local stations enjoyed it because they get some extra programming. But we may take a break for a while until we have a better idea on what's going to happen as schools try to reopen. It's hard to find an answer or pick an answer when you don't know what the right answer is. But 9/11, I think I get what you're saying. And at the same time, I feel it was a different context, because not only did we know who the antagonist was someone, outside our geographic boundaries. It was this organization on the other side of the planet, far away from here. So I think it was easier to direct our anger and to rally, because the antagonist, the enemy, was external. What we're seeing here with George Floyd, Jacob Blake, and all of the issues, all of these incidents over the last 4 years, whether it was Colin Kaepernick taking a knee or Megan Rapinoe and U.S. soccer, etc. It's internal. And I feel this is exposing divisions that we have had, that have always been there, but in situations like 9/11, or when a foreign entity attempts to interfere with our livelihoods, I feel it's easier to unite in those circumstances because we can project our feelings somewhere else. The pandemic and the sports scene is forcing us to do internal reflections, and it can make us uncomfortable. It makes us frightened, worried, scared, and what have you. And I keep a low profile politically on my social media channels. That doesn't mean I don't have feelings, but I feel my role is better served by giving others a chance to respond than to just go on and pontificate as I've been doing for almost an hour now. But again, I've been reading some comments, feedback from my social media channels, and I'm grateful for those who have taken the time to leave a remark, and we'll be doing more of that. But it's forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. And I am not implying that one version or one interpretation of these actions is better than another, or that one analysis is better than another. I'm not here to judge who's right and who's wrong, but it makes us wince. Up until about March, these are subjects we didn't necessarily have to think about all the time. And I do wonder, if it wasn't for the pandemic, how easy would it be to distract ourselves with a baseball season, with the NFL, with the free agency, because with pro sports there is no off season anymore. The free agency that would have been going on when the NBA, we would have had a lot of movement by now, and all this talk about what the new season would look like. Instead, we're trying to wrap up the old one, and we'll have a delayed start to the new season. Sports, for a time, was an escape, but then again, sports has also been a platform for political advocacy. 1968 Olympics come to mind. In Mexico City, the Black Power symbol, that was controversial. Muhammad Ali was stripped of his boxing license for several years because he chose not to participate in the Vietnam War. So what we're seeing isn't new. I think the difference is our current situation forces us to be more introspective than we may have considered. And we also have more ways to amplify our voice. You don't have to go through the proper channels and hope that your story will be featured on a local news network or a newspaper. You don't have to wait for them to share your story. You can get it out there, share your thoughts unfiltered in the moment, and no one can stop you from doing that. Whether it's recording videos on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, Twitter, or writing blogs, articles, posts, or engaging in some other activity that speaks to your cause. So, sports, in a sense, have always intersected with current events. I just believe we're paying more attention to it than we have before. And I doubt it's going to go away, because even if you didn't have unfortunate tragedies like Kenosha or what happened to George Floyd, which was at least the third in a series of high-profile killings of black men in my home state of Minnesota. So we've been in the news for some unpleasant things, perhaps more often than I would like. You know, I love growing up here, and I've loved the people that I've met, and you know, I wouldn't change where I live, but I just don't see us going back to normal, even when this pandemic is over and we can return to sporting events. We can cheer for our favorite teams and players again. Who knows what the audience will look like, but that's out of my control. You know, that's not up to me to decide how many will attend, etc. But something that I've gathered over the last several years as I've watched movements like Black Lives Matter evolve, and stances from coaches, players, and corporations evolve, is that we're always on the proverbial doorstep of going through the cycle again. I don't know when, I don't know where it will happen, but there's a sense of inevitability. And Milwaukee's decision to boycott a playoff game, WNBA teams deciding to stop play every 7 minutes of each quarter to make a statement. Some WNBA players chose to sit out to take up civics issues. Renee Montgomery is one of them. We're seeing a level of risk and sacrifice that I have to applaud them for, not because I agree with them per se. Again, you know, my feelings evolve, and I'm grateful that my network, my viewers, allow me to evolve my views on this. I have to applaud them for taking a risk. It may not pay off. It may backfire, but I love to quote movie and TV lines because I feel they speak to current events. Steve Trevor in the Wonder Woman film, when he was asked about his involvement in World War I or trying to get back to fight alongside his forces when he ended up in the Themyscira, relayed something that his father had told him in the film, where he said, "I can do nothing or I can do something, and I've already tried nothing." I'm paraphrasing, but I feel that is the genesis behind the boycott from the Bucks and the decision from WNBA teams tonight, for example, to stop play every 7 minutes, or players like Natasha Cloud and Renee Montgomery to sit out the year and focus on advocacy. Because in their view, maybe they tried to cast it aside. They tried nothing, and nothing changed. So it may be uncomfortable. It might anger some people, but if you don't do anything, how do you expect things to change? How do you expect people to at least consider your perspective? So I've expressed a lot of feelings, a lot of analysis, and I appreciate those who did make comments. And if you'd like to drop one, as I've noted before, whether it's live or if you want to do this on demand for those that aren't able to watch this stream live, just drop a comment on YouTube. And we are hoping to schedule some episodes of Mic'd Up Sports to discuss this, to complement the summer series that we taped, where we had guests on to share their feelings about George Floyd and the actions that companies and sports organizations were taking. If you'd like to do so, or if you'd like to come on and do a traditional Zoom chat or Skype chat, we're still doing those from home to respect the health and safety of everyone in this pandemic. Contact us at tsbtelevision@gmail.com or social media at the Mike Peden on Twitter or Instagram. And I find it amusing because every time I would plug those channels, I would get a new remark, but wanted to create an opportunity just to get a rapid reaction and to share some thoughts and developments as we all wait to see what happens next, what happens tomorrow, and what will be the status of the playoff series that are now on hold in the NBA. But for those of you who did tune in for this first live stream on YouTube, I want to thank you for doing so. And perhaps we'll do more of these in the road ahead, but I wanted to create an unfiltered platform. I know a lot of you appreciate the polish and the work that go into our video products, whether it's Mic'd Up Sports or our broadcast, to create the feel of a network broadcast. And it's something that I've set out to do as a way of standing out, because the way I see it, and I've been a part of this through my involvement with past organizations, anyone can do a single camera stream. So how do you separate yourself from the pack? And we'll go back to our professionally polished programming. I can assure you of that. But I wanted to open the doors for anyone who did want to share their opinions, their feelings, and do so in a way where they're respected. And that's what we'll continue to do, whether it's through our live stream or through our traditional format of uploading videos. So thanks again for joining us in this live stream and this rapid reaction to the Bucks boycott and the NBA, WNBA making changes to accommodate what is happening in Kenosha. And I'm sure this will be the first of many conversations you will find on this channel in the days and perhaps weeks to come. Thanks for watching.